Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week comes from the Plugin Alliance. It's the Lindell 80 series. This is a features video, so if you're looking for audio examples, then look for the Lindell 80 series video that says audio examples. Good place to go. On that, you'll find the music from Letters from Jet. Find My Way Gone is the song, the featured song for the audio examples, and you can get to their music, lettersfromjet.com. So let's take a look at this and kind of do a broad overview. Essentially, in a nutshell, this is an emulation of what would be an 8028 console. And so what we have is a master bus section and a channel strip. And although in reality, the 8028 is basically made up of the 1073 preamp and a 3-band EQ, and the rest of it is just output buses, which is basically what you get to hear. That is really the whole console. But what they've added here in this 80 series is a portion of the 2254 compressor. So what you get with all of this setup is the 1073 preamp, the 1073 EQ, the 1084 EQ, which is a variation, uses the same mic preamp, but has some additional options on the EQ section. You get the compressor section from the 2254 limiter compressor, and then you get an added bonus here, which is a gate. And for the most part, I think the first gates that were part of every channel strip probably didn't happen until the mid or late 70s with the B-Series SSL console, I believe, was the first to have that. So this is sort of a unique little added feature, and there's some nice little bonus things that are added on to it. And we have the master bus section. So what this is the 1272 line amplifier that is at the output buses of the console. So on the 8028 console, I believe it was in a 16-channel output bus, or 16 buses. I could be wrong about that. It could be 8, but I'm pretty sure it was 16 buses at the output. So each one of those would have had a line amplifier, which is basically the same circuit, more or less, that you get with the 1073 preamp, the Marinair transformer, and that whole design, but with just limited gain range available on it. So what we have here is a console channel strip built in with TMT technology, licensed from the Plugin Alliance, or Brainworks. And this is really a killer plugin. This is like having an 8028 console now in your DAW, which is everything. I've been waiting for something like this for a long time, and so it's great. Lindell is kind of the first here with it, and I think it's really amazing. So what I'm going to do is kind of go over the basic features here. We'll go through all the different signal flow, all the options, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on here. And then there'll be an audio examples video, which will be separate from this. So if that's what you're looking for, again, you can skip over to that video right away if you already understand what's going on. So let's take a look at the GUI. And just start here. We have the top section here, the header, just simple A/B. You have input/output calibrations. And then we have a menu here with some different settings. I'm going to kind of go over real quick. We have the meter section, which will show input/output level and compressor and gate gain reduction. We have the mic preamp section here, the EQ section here, which can be a 1073 EQ or a 1084 EQ. We have the compressor section right here. We have a gate section right here, output fader right here. And up at the top here it's in a different section, and obviously it has a different look at it. You get the little scribble strip here with the track name written in. So this is the drums, and that will show up just on this stem over here. So you'll see it there. And then you have the TMT selections here. So all of that stuff is available and great, and you have all the same ability to kind of switch it up or link to 2 channels to put it in a quote-unquote digital mode. Cut, phase reverse, all the things you would kind of expect with a full channel strip plugin. So that's the basics of it. And on the 1272, it's pretty straightforward. We have input, output, we have a gain trim, right? So this is just the line amp. You have a way to drive that with the harmonic distortion, and then you have a master fader, right? You'll notice that the master fader is different because it starts at 0 and goes down to nothing, whereas most of the channel faders will go +10 to nothing. So let's go over the just the bar up here at the top. Quick A/B selection, input and output for calibration. There's some really interesting things under the hood here. You can actually go in and set the calibration here to whatever configuration you want. And if you're confused about this, the basics of it is the higher or lower the number here, I guess the higher number, I guess technically, would be this is setting the input level. So if you have a signal coming in at -12, that would be hotter, 8 dB hotter than -20. So these are different recording standards. And then the output would be calibrated to compensate for unity gain. So this was originally set up with the original integration of digital equipment so that you could set an analog input level and have an output level coming out that would correspond to making it unity gain. So when you set this to a higher number, you'll get more signal passing in, and therefore you'll have more clipping or more harmonic distortion. And if you set the level down lower, you're going to give yourself more headroom. That's the basics of it, if I can make it any clearer than that. Now, when you set a calibration point, if there's like a standard, say you like to use -18, you could set it there, and you can then right here in the menu, a really cool feature, set it to all instances, and then you could save it as a default. So every time you load it up, it'll automatically load up with your standard. Very cool feature. There's also oversampling. So it defaults to 2 times oversampling. You can go up to 16 times autosampling. I couldn't get it to play back on my system at 16 times about 30 plus channels. So that's quite a lot probably for that kind of a load, but I could bounce it out offline at that level. I haven't experimented enough with that, but again, you could set it for all instances or do it on just the individual one if it's, say, like an important track like a vocal or something. You could turn the noise on or off. It says low level, but there's no measurement, and it doesn't really register so much on the meters here, so it's very low overall. Again, you could set that off and do those things. And then this is kind of an interesting one, which is the clipping. Now, normally analog circuits will have some amount of clipping to them, so the op amps that will be running in this gear or any analog gear will have a limit based on the power supply, how much power it has for the amplifier. And once you exceed that power, you basically just hard clipping. And so that's the actual analog position. That would be emulating what happens with the actual hardware. If you go to soft clipping, though, it will soften that up. So you may find that with certain songs, you don't want that hard edge. You want to kind of soften it up a little bit. Or you could turn it off altogether, which will sort of allow a more natural headroom that is not clipped at all. So that gives you a lot of options. I played around a little bit with this, and I'll go over it in the audio examples. Very, very cool. Again, you could put it in all instances, save it as default. I set the default here to hard. There's also the user interface size. Now, if you happen to be working on a laptop, it'll never get bigger than the resolution of your laptop screen. Put it that way. So if you set it to 100% and that might be bigger than what your screen is available, it will, make it whatever the maximum is capable based on your system specs. So all of that sort of stuff is there. So those are some really powerful options. And then you can also check the box here for external keying of the compression or the gate. So that shows up. And then you would set the bus from over here for the external trigger. Now, let's go over to the meters, and we'll just kind of work our way across. Essentially, the signal flow goes left to right, and there's no way to change that around. So you get mic preamp, EQ, compression, and then the gate in that order. And so we'll start up at the top here. What we have here is the metering, right? So this is going to show input on the left. So basically like a vertical meter, vertical view style meter. And what we have is input level on the left, output level on the right. With these two lines, you'll see them kind of going up and down. You see compressor gain reduction here, gating gain reduction here. So that will follow for your settings over on this end. We have the mic preamp. We can drive harmonic distortion without adding any gain. So that's just an easy matter of driving that upward. You see that in all the channel strip plugins from Plugin Alliance. So nothing new there, but very powerful and cool. And then we have the preamp gain. So we have our normal preamp gain here. Now in the real hardware, this goes into stepped positions of 5 dB. Here, this is set to variable positioning, so you can kind of move it around. You have a 20 dB pad. This is actually quite cool because they added in a unique thing here, which is great, which is just a unity switch. And all that does is that, let's say that you want more headroom on a particular channel, you could hit the -20, it'll run through the full signal path at -20, but at the output give you the 20 dB back, so it operates at unity gain. So that's kind of a cool thing. And even if you don't use the pad and you just want to overdrive for distortion, you can actually drive the preamp, hit the unity switch, and you'll have basically the same amount of gain at output as what you have coming in. So it'll kind of keep things more or less normalized. And if you go back over here to the clipping settings, that becomes relevant to the sound of the preamp when you actually work with it. So that's kind of a cool feature that they added in there. I like that. On the EQ section, essentially you can operate in two modes. We could operate it as a 1073 EQ. So what you have is a high frequency shelf. It's a 3-band EQ with a high frequency shelf set to 12K. And then you have a mid-band parametric with, 6 selected frequencies there. You can put the band off. And then 4 selected frequencies, discrete frequencies on the low shelf. So what you have is a low shelf, a high shelf, and a mid-band parametric. And then you have a high-pass filter, which is giving about 18 dB per octave. So you put the EQ in and out here. You can put the filter in separately from the EQ, which is great. And if you need a little bit more flexibility, then you can switch to the 1084 EQ. The 1084, you might be confusing with the 1081, which is a 4-band EQ, right? It has 2 mid-bands. The 1084 was designed to fit as a replacement for the 1073 in the 8028 console. So it's the exact same cassette size and configuration and will fit in. It's still a 3-band EQ, but it adds some additional features. First of all, on the high-end shelf, you now have 3 selectable frequencies. So instead of being fixed to 12K, you have 10, 12, and 16, which is great. You have a high Q switch. So if you're familiar with the 1081, which has the high Q switch for the mid-bands, that will narrow the Q, or the bandwidth, of the mid-band. So that'll happen here. So you have the exact same frequencies, but now you have the ability to work with a narrower frequency range by selecting it there. The low shelving EQ is exactly the same, and what's added in here is a low-pass filter. So this gives you same 18 dB per octave. You can go down to 6K and all the way to the off position. Again, you can put the filter in and out overall. So that's the whole EQ section, and it sounds amazing. I played around with it. When we get to the audio examples in the next video, you'll kind of see how that flies, and it's very cool. All right, so here we have the compressor section. So the 2254E, which if you're familiar with the Lindell, they've done an emulation of this, their 254E limiter and compressor, and this is an emulation of that same unit, and it's actually square, just like you see it here, designed pretty much with the exact same layout that you see here. But what they've done is they've grabbed the compressor section from here, minus the limiter section, and they've put it in here in the channel strip as something you can add in. So what you have is the wet-dry mix, which is great for parallel compression. You have a filter sidechain, which you can just throw in there. So that will work just with the sidechain. You have threshold, ratio, right? So all the same ratio settings, 1.5 to 1 up to 6 to 1. Makeup gain. What's cool here that's a little bit different, again, they've added in a variable control on the makeup gain, where on the hardware unit it's in stepped increments as you go around, and even if you go to the 254E, it's in stepped increments. So having that flexibility with the output level just kind of allow you to match your output gain a little bit better. And then we have the recovery settings. So they actually added in 100 for a release time. I think the original hardware started at 400 and went up to the auto setting. So we have all of that. You can put it into circuit here. There's a Nouveau filter, which is a sidechain filter. So it's not an EQ, or it's an EQ, but it's in the sidechain, which is just basically a 3 dB octave curve to kind of smooth out the compression. So that's something you could kind of take in or out and see how your gain reduction or how the compressor reacts and kind of work accordingly with it. Now, in normal circumstances, if I recall right, and I was looking for the documentation on this, it's sort of hard to find, I believe that the attack time on this compressor is program dependent, but basically in the range of 5 to 7 milliseconds under normal circumstances. And what they've done is they've added in a fast attack here. Now, they did not give any specifications on the actual attack time, but it sounds to me like it's microseconds, that it's less than a millisecond, just off the top. So I can't verify that, but that's basically what it sounds like. So that gives you that extra, if you really need to, grab onto something and tone down a transient, that's the way to do it. There's also the nuke setting. Now, the nuke setting is anytime you want to just, if you're just looking to do a super heavy parallel compression, it just makes it easy. You don't have to play with, not being able to get down low enough on your threshold or high enough ratio or all that sort of stuff. Hit the nuke button and you'll have 12 to 16 dB of gain reduction instantly. So that's kind of a cool feature for that. And then you can work in the parallel compression right up here. So this is a very powerful unit. Great addition here too, because one of the frustrating things with working on 8028 console would be the fact that you don't have compressors on every channel. And I can only say that because in the era I grew up in, really starting out on SSL consoles where the compressors were on every channel strip, I got used to that. And then you kind of step back in time a decade to a console that didn't have that. And it seems like, hey, wait a minute, I'm missing something. But, still, it's a great addition. Then we have the gate. So on the gate, at the very top, we have the TMT section, right? So all of that stuff should be self-explanatory. You can link the left and right, which makes them the same channel number. Otherwise, you can randomly select channels. Now, with this console, there are only 32 options. So I believe the original console was 32 channels. So that's part of how that got to be that way. Or 36. 32, 36, or whatever it is. You get 32, put it that way. So that's what you're getting here. And then you could do the all button, which will toggle all of the instances. So all of that, and it shows the name of the track on the channel strip, which is cool. The gate itself is, it's an interesting design. So this is, if you're familiar with any of the Neve gates, especially in the V series consoles, all through the 88RS consoles, then you understand what hysteresis is. So essentially, if you understand gates, there's an open and closed threshold on many gates, especially digital gates. So this concept was not lost or is not something that was invented in digital. It actually existed in the analog realm. And I seem to recall that, and I was surprised to see it in doing some research on some of the old Neve stuff, that Rupert had made an actual gate module. And I could just never find any information about it. So I could be, completely out of my mind. I don't know if they emulated it here or whether this is just basically got the look and feel, but it's basically got, the later Neve V-Series console gate style thing. But anyway, essentially what you have is a threshold and then a hysteresis control. So if I say add 4 dB here to the hysteresis, what happens is the open threshold is whatever I set here, right? So let's say that's 5, so it would be 9. Is that number right? No, because it's -5. All right, so let's say it's -5, so that would make it 0 if this was 5. I don't know what I'm doing with my math here. I'm all over the place. So that's your open threshold, and then this would be the closed threshold. So this is in addition. So if I adjust this, this relatively stays in that same position. So I've set this to -10. Then that adds 4 to that, which is -6. I'll get my math right sooner or later. So that would be the -6 would be the open threshold, -10 would be the closed threshold. That's the basic idea of it. Then you have a range for how far down it dips, which is cool. You got a recovery time, everything from 20 milliseconds all the way up to 2 seconds, right? You can operate it as an expander, which is most of the time like a soft gating type of thing. Used to use this a lot on noisy reverb returns and things like that, or tracks just to limit tape hiss, to put like a very soft gate, slow closing gate. But you have that option. So when you do it in expander mode, it basically works on like a 1 to 2 ratio. So every dB below threshold, it drops the signal down by 2 dB. That's the basic idea. And there's also a ducking feature into it, which is very cool. So with the ducking feature, essentially it works inversely. So the actual sound will drop down based on how much the range at the attack. So it actually will duck the attack, and then when the signal falls below threshold, it will release back to normal. So it's the opposite effect. And so this can be a way of sidechain triggering something. So as an actual ducker. So it's pretty cool on that end. Again, the in switch, we're putting that in circuit. And the fast attack. Now, under normal circumstances, the gate itself has, at its fast attack, is like 50 microseconds. And at its slow attack is like 500 microseconds. So we're still less than a millisecond. So it's fast overall, very fast acting. And so in that case, it ends up being quite useful in instances where you need a gate. It's not as much as it was in the analog era, that's for sure, because you're not dealing with as much noise, or you certainly have control with most things to shut it off. But it's there and available for doing things like snare bottoms and stuff like that, and getting rid of bleed from other drums and other elements that things that might be tracked together or whatever. Let's see. We have the output fader here. Now the output fader is prior to the final output transformers. So we have transformers at the input, transformers at the output, and this is prior to that. So if you push this, it will drive that and you will get harmonic distortion. So this is not just a digital output thing. It actually does have some coloration principles if you kind of dig into it and get that. So if you lower input gain and you raise output gain, you'll get a different characteristic sound than just running at unity. And then you have a cut and a phase inversion here. So quite a lot going on with this. Again, just remember the signal flow is left to right, just as you see it. Pretty straightforward. And then all of this ends up here to something that's the 1272, the bus channel. And this is very simple. It's just going to show input level and output level, assuming that you make some kind of adjustment here with the trim. And then you can drive harmonic distortion by hitting the, pulling this up or down, which you see on a lot of the Brainworks channel strips. And then you have a master fader. And it's pretty much that simple. And what you get here is purely, what you're mostly getting here is just tonal coloration. And it will add like a richness and a warmth to the sound, which is a characteristic that you get from transformers, and particularly from the transformer amp design of the 1073, which is essentially what you get with this. All right, so that's the overview. You can follow up with here to the actual audio examples video. In the audio examples video, obviously, I will spend less time talking about what these individual features do, but kind of demonstrating just how some of these features are valuable in different mixing situations, and you'll hear the song there. So there we have it, Plugin of the Week from Plugin Alliance, the Lindell 80 series. This is just a features video. You ought to know that by now. And we'll see you in the next one. All right, there we have it.